Evening all, welcome back to the prison. So taking a look again, I haven't played this for a while actually. I think it's one of these games that I'm really quite enamored with, and I think I just get so caught up with other games that I forget, how good it is. You know how it is, right? You play a game, you just love it. Everything about it is really cool. Something like Dwarf Fortress. Those of you who played that probably know what I mean here. In that the game you could immerse yourself fully within the game so much, but yet when something new comes along, you play that, and then you actually forget that you're playing these older games. Grand Theft Auto was a bit like this for me as well. But anyway, so haven't played this for a while, but I thought I'd just take a bit of a play of it. And I noticed there's some general updates in terms of, as you see here, the bureaucracy has got a few more options, and I think just generally the game's a touch more polished. As you can see, the interface on the top as well is looking quite good as well. So I think in general, the game is coming together quite nicely. Now, this is one of those games that I think is really being pitched quite heavily as being, quite a substantial game for the future, because I think, certainly with a lot of the gaming press, they seem to be doing a lot of exposés upon it, and I can see probably why they're doing it, because it is a very addictive kind of management game. It's got the real feel of The Sims, and I think, but it's actually not as kind of twee as The Sims, if you know what I mean by twee. It's not as kind of 14-year-old girl friendly as The Sims, which is good, because obviously, you want to play a game that's got a bit of grit behind it. I think some of the development of this game as well is quite interesting, because it does seem to be marking a movement away from the kind of traditional model of developing games, which has always been, big software houses producing something, releasing it, and then we consume it, and then we basically move on. Nowadays, I think with the thing, particularly since Minecraft possibly, the whole process has been altered, if you like, because now developers will develop a game through alpha, the very initial stages of a game, and then they'll probably release it. So you'll have early access, you'll have sort of the ability to get into the game at its very earliest stages, and then help on its development. So it's quite an interesting kind of time, I guess, for game development as it goes, because I think a lot of the time now you're seeing a kind of different commercial model being used, quite frankly. So with Prison Architect, obviously they released this as a beta, so a beta is a more finished, developed alpha, so whatever it gets to beta is going to be roughly what actually ends up hitting the market. And I think it's good, because usually betas are more polished, there's more of a game to play, and I think particularly when you look at things like Minecraft, which I played at beta, it was a very kind of interesting kind of game, because again, I think, just the sheer fact of what it was, a huge sandbox like Prison Architect, like Terraria, like Edge of Space, and all of these games, is they're being kind of pitched very early in the development process, because in essence that's really what you want to do. You want to get people engaged at the very front of the game. It also probably helps you with game development as well, because think of the investment that you probably have to put in to do a game. Is you take a gamble all the way through the process that people will like your graphics, mechanics, your story, your background, whatever it may be. You're taking a huge gamble, and having, I think, early access to a beta community is good, because it means that you can kind of just double check that that people will respond well to it. So Dust 514 is a great example here as well, because obviously they had that game pretty much opened through a beta phase, and then they released it obviously fully, and I think the beta did bring a lot of direction, let's say, to it. So it's quite a challenging kind of environment to release games in nowadays anyway. Certain games like Star Citizen, if you're a big kind of space shooter fan, and I'm sure you know what Star Citizen is, if you've never heard of it, I command you to go and Google it right now, because it's a Kickstarter for the guy that created, I believe, Wing Commander, and it just looks astonishingly good. It's going to be, I think, a real step change in the way gaming is done. And it looks pretty good. So I think if you're interested in these kind of games, then I think certainly check out Star Citizen, which you can actually gain access to the beta right now. But I'm kind of hesitant to do that for myself, because I'd like to be surprised more so with the fuller game. But it does seem to show a real step change in certainly the way that gaming is being consumed nowadays. Now, it's an interesting point because I think certainly when you look at a lot of games, currently, is the simple fact is software houses are going bankrupt, literally, one after the other. And it just seems that a lot of the industry is in kind of upheaval because, again, like the music industry, they've kind of had to accept that, the reality is that piracy is never going to be combated. People will always find a way to pirate. But if you change the rules of the game, piracy doesn't matter anymore. So if you make a game free to play, or if you sort of involve some form of requirement to subscribe to then get the new content, etc., then that is seen as a much more stable and almost anti-pirate kind of methodology. So certainly I think you're going to see a lot more of that as well. Anyway, let's talk more about Prison Architect. As it stands, I think the latest version of this game has kind of brought a bit more kind of challenge to it, certainly when it comes to security. So, for example, in my kitchen area, as you can see, every time our prisoners run through, they get basically through a metal detector. And I've noticed that sometimes it's not always resulting in a positive search, which is interesting because it means that obviously if you keep searching prisoners, they'll feel victimized, and then all of a sudden you've got a riot on your hand. And many other things. And look at that thing flash there. That's not good. I think in terms of addressing the needs of the prisoners as well, it seems a bit more tricky to keep them happy. They seem to get a lot more unhappy very quickly. So obviously they've made the game a little bit harder, I would say. Every prison obviously has to make its money as well. So one of the key things within the prison is the workshops, and they're making considerable money for the game to progress further and grow and expand and whatnot. So I think the fact that I'm also working the prisoners quite hard, I think is also causing slight problems as well. Now, I've generally stuck with medium security prisoners. I think this is just due to the fact that the low security ones I don't think bring in as much money, and the high security ones are obviously quite dangerous people. So I think once I've got enough cash, I'll probably build a kind of self-contained high prisoner security wing that's very much set alone from the normal one, I think, just to be sort of safe. But I can certainly say that the game is really progressing nicely. Again, if you haven't played this yet, certainly give it a go. I think it's worth $10, $20 maybe a bit more, but it's worth it because it's a great management game. And again, in terms of dollar to money to time, entertain value, it's way up there because you'll buy this and you'll play it for days. I think it's a real kind of management style game that if you like things like Dwarf Fortress, or if you remember things like Dungeon Keeper or games like that, it's got that sort of feel to it. There's a bit of cheekiness in there as well. So I heartily recommend it. I think it's a challenging one to kind of really dominate as well, because the annoying thing is that one mistake could lose you your prison. I think it's a tricky one to kind of get right. So keep saving regularly, but sometimes your saves will be for nothing because if you balls up, then your prison's lost. I love the fact that, again, it's also a growing game as well. So as you start to get more money, you feel more invested. So like things like StarMade, where pretty much your progress is building your ship and getting it bigger and making it better. You also have that feeling within this game as well, because you really want to grow the game, the prison, and make it ultimately awesome and brilliant. And I think it rarely have I come across a management game where you feel so invested to make this the best you can. Usually you just kind of tick a box and it's like, yeah, I need a dungeon, right, there we go, dungeon built, get on with it. Whereas with this, you actually do find that you want to make it the perfect dungeon that's most efficient, that's most presentable. It's a nice feature, and I think it's certainly something that I think you'll find quite enjoyable. In terms of the development of this, I'm not entirely up to speed with where and what's coming next. But I think it's certainly going to be a game that I keep my eye on. I do enjoy these kind of games. It's a good break as well. I mean, gaming is not just a pastime or an entertainment. It is a hobby. And I think, your gaming can help with your current moods. It can help certainly with your kind of current state of mind. And don't worry, I'm not getting all psychologist on you, but what I find is that I usually, if I'm having a bad day, if we've had a bit of a crap day, gaming can be something that can either enhance or make that a lot worse. It's like a film, it's like a soap opera, but you're in control of it. So I think it's ultimately more satisfying. But I think games like this are really good if you've had a bad day, just to take your mind off stuff. Literally just fill your mind with something else, and it just becomes a lot more easier to do. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll take sporadic looks back at this game. I think it's a game I'm going to come back and forward to. Another one is Kerbal Space Program. I love that game so much, but I just never get time to play it. So I'm going to try and make some time and I think have a bit more fun with that. But in general, I think it's a great game, and I think certainly don't forget it. If you've already got it, give it another go, and if you haven't got it, go and get it. It's awesome. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.